Thank you so much for joining us in our April webinar, which is a celebration of the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows, the 30th year with our initial inductees. And so, so today we want to look at competitive intelligence, what we've learned, and what's next in the context of the time that the fellows have served, going back to the early days. So a little bit of background about who we are. So we are a nonprofit educational organization whose mission is to foster the practice of CI. So we serve the profession, we also serve professionals. And so as those of you who've been to our website, you see that we have 4 dimensions to our service. You know, we are ambassadors, champions, mentors, and educators, or ACME. And all of this, you know, serves the profession as well as the users, intelligence users, and so we are also represented across the globe, as you can see here. But our history goes way back, and it starts actually in Washington, D.C. So in 1986 was the founding of the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals, now known as the Strategic and Competitive Intelligence Professionals. And back then it was basically a group of people in a ballroom who decided that this practice needs to be formalized and it needs its own association. So, you know, these prescient and driven leaders created this body that still exists now. And in 1990, it was a recognition of the first CI fellows under SCIP. And subsequently, we've been recognizing fellows on an annual basis. And so the folks who've been the founders since 1986 are among the first cohorts. And the very first cohort, as you can see, going back 1990 is Robert Pfeiffer, Leonard Fold, Jan Herring, and Dr. John Prescott, many of whom you may know. And so, you know, they've written books and published papers, and basically this cohort and those in the early days helped to shape the profession, the field, the practices that we've been engaging in since. So we have a lot, you know, we have a lot to be thankful for, and we have them to thank for it as well. And so in 2018, the CI fellows formalized to this nonprofit status, and we became this body that is the Council of Competitive Intelligence Fellows. And so rather than being purely an honorary association as it had been, and individuals within it were continuing to advance the practice of CI, we banded together, and so now we are a body that holds a number of different educational initiatives to continue in this work on a more formal basis. So this is where we are. And so today's fellows who are on the webinar are Dr. Brad Ashton, Sean Campbell, I'm Cynthia Cheng, Correia, the president of the CI Fellows, with Mark Chussil, Claudia Clayton, Dr. Craig Fleisher, who is our vice president, Suki Fuller, August Jackson, Derek Johnson, Clifford Kalb, Martha Matteo, Ellen Naylor, Dr. Michael Neugarten, and Alysee Nockels. And so you'll hear from us in various ways, via the chat, also via this discussion that we'll be having, and so please feel free to weigh in, those of you who are in the audience, and you know, via the chat panel, and also, as I mentioned, you know, be posting the Q&A, and if you would like to speak, I'm happy to open the line for you as well. So so as we go. The core of our discussion here is really going to be looking at our practice through the decades. I think what better way to celebrate where we've been and how far we've come as a body and as a profession than focus on what we've learned, what's ahead, and how we can prepare. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to some of our fellows to begin discussion, where we'll briefly touch on these areas and spark this discussion among you, because again, we are not just talking heads. This is not a presentation. This is a discussion. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear your perspectives, your questions. And many of you who are in the audience are also longtime practitioners too. So you have very much to share. So with that, I'm going to turn to our participants. And Craig, so you were the first panelist to join us and the first that I added to the queue. So would you like to kick off this conversation and just, just give us a sketch on what we've learned through your
Yeah.
perspective and insights, what's ahead, and how we can prepare.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the chat box, I'm glad you're starting with me because I was actually working for and with one of those 4 original fellows back in 1990, and that was Dr. John Prescott.
That's right.
And it was interesting because we had just finished doing a large-scale study of SCIP's membership, which back in 1990 was somewhere in the 1,500 to 2,000 range. I don't remember exactly, but we did this study, which was the second one that had been done, under the auspices of SCIP. And it was called SCIP, Who We Are and What We Do. And it was designed to try to get a sense of, where had SCIP come from, where was it at, and maybe a little bit of where it was headed. And it was fascinating because back at that time, the first year of the fellows, SCIP was growing fast. There was a increasing interest in competitive intelligence. We were starting to see lots of books published, one of which was done again by another one of those original fellows, Lenny Fold. And we started to see a big impetus of growth, is I guess the best way to call it. Lots of optimism. We were seeing, other kinds of business interests starting to set up their first CI units. And if you think about it, in that first decade of the 90s, when those first fellows came out, we saw an explosion actually at the time of new CI units across a variety of different industries, and we started to see that happening globally. And I'll note again, for those who know me, I do try to take a global perspective. CI activities, no surprise, were going on in other places even earlier than SCIP was formed back in the mid '80s. But the reality is, SCIP really kind of at that time galvanized, kind of brought together a lot of those resources and interests, and made a significant difference. So one of the things I'll just note: what have we learned? Well, we've come a long way, and we've made probably a couple of different eras of CI practice that many of us were part of and actually participated in. There's a lot of debate and disagreement. I know we've had that on these webinars in the past about whether we're still seeing momentum and whether we're still growing and whether we're still serving the important roles that maybe we were initially, mandated to serve. And of course, there's disagreement and debate about it. So I'd argue what we've learned are a lot of things that we're still learning. We're still trying to understand who we are, what we do. We're still kind of struggling to explain, what competitive intelligence is to people outside of our fields. And we've got to, we've made a lot of progress, and then I think we still have a lot more progress to make still, and I'll stop there.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, and thanks for helping to flesh this out a bit as well. It's great to hear from from people who were there in the beginning, and I can't claim to be one of those, so I do appreciate this very much. And so up next, I would like to turn this over to Mark Chussil. So Mark, you're here with us as well, and what would you like to share in terms of what you've learned, what's ahead, and how we can prepare?
Okay, thanks, Cynthia, and thank you everybody for being here. Now, I think that my trademark is to be weird, and I plan to live down to that now. So I think it's hard to tell what's changed in the outside world versus what's changed in the inside world of ourselves. And so when I look at what I think has changed, I don't know if I'm really looking at changes in the world or if it's just that over the years, I see things differently. But what I am seeing is that people are becoming cogs in machines. We can call it the gig economy. We can call it all kinds of things having to do with performance. But we are input-output devices. We are given tasks and goals. We are useful on demand. We are promoted if we succeed and discarded if we fail. Now, I see it accelerating as we venerate capitalism in a society that answers questions like, what are you worth in dollars? We focus a lot on speed. That is something that I really think has changed over the years. We want to be faster at things. We want to make the same mistakes, but we want to do them faster. And that gives us less time to think. My research has shown that that taking time to think actually makes a positive difference in the quality of the decisions that we make. That shouldn't be surprising, but that's not the way that we behave. Now, I know that what I'm saying sounds dystopian and bleak, and it may even sound politically partisan for all I know. And I do not mean to sound judgmental. And we can live very comfortable lives as cogs, and for all I know, that's our purpose, cue the circle of life. But at this point in my life, I question how many more big companies I will help to become bigger. You don't have to do something with all that right now. What I would suggest, though, is that from your perspective as a personal human being, start thinking about that kind of stuff as early as possible, because it will help you to shape where you're going. So for what's ahead, okay, let's cheer up. There are things that I see changing a lot in business. A few decades ago, when I was just getting started, there was something called the PIMS program at the Strategic Planning Institute. And they were starting to use data to understand what leads to profitability and what leads away from profitability. The work that I do now in simulation has some of that flavor as well, and it's really promising stuff. But the thing is, when we look at data, there are only data from the past. We don't have data about the future. You can't have data about the future. So what we have to be doing, if we want to disrupt anything, if we want to be on the forefront of something, we've got to look forward at the kind of possibilities that are there. And what makes me optimistic is that I see much better decisions being possible for businesses and for us personally. And that, I think, can improve life for everybody. As for how you can prepare, the best that I can offer is to do your best to think something new, see something new. I've had a bunch of people go through some simulations that I've developed. And by far the most common thing that people ask me is, what was my score? And that's fine, I can tell you your score. And people will say, okay, thank you very much, and off they go. Fewer people say, how does it work? They want to understand how the thing works. And okay, talk to them about that, and that's pretty cool. Only a few ask, what does it mean? And those people are the ones who I think are the strategists, are the ones who I think have the best potential to be broadening what we do in our field. So I would urge you, read outside your field, read social psychology, read about new perspectives, such as Yuval Noah Harari's books like Sapiens, Homo Deus, and so on. Read things like Daniel Quinn's Ishmael. Just broaden your mind, and that's the best I can give you. And thank you.
Your best is fantastic as usual, and we really appreciate this. I'm looking at the panel as you're speaking, and there are a lot of nodding heads. So I think that either we share your weirdness, or there's some sort of a global twitch that we've got going on. So thank you, and so in the interest of time, I'm going to just move along, and please feel free, for those of you who are listening to what the fellows are saying, as it's resonating with you, post via the chat, and then we can also call on you as well, to add to the discussion. And so next, let's go to Ellen Naylor. So Ellen, would you like to share your thoughts?
I'll share my thoughts more on a personal.
Yeah, and actually your audio is a bit, you're sounding very distant. So if you wouldn't mind adjusting that, please.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, so maybe in the meantime.
Yeah, go to someone else while I figure this out.
Okay, sounds good. And so we have Derek Johnson here with us as well. And so Derek, would you like to share your thoughts about what we've learned, what's ahead, as well as how we can prepare? And actually, I don't hear you as well. So, what perhaps I think you may have called in by phone. Let's see.
Yeah.
All right. Did I get you, Derek?
Not.
There
I'm
you
back.
are. All right. It's a phone.
Sorry. I was saying you have like a couple hours for me to pontificate on this, and I'm of course only kidding. First, I'm going to address the little thread. Alan commented about my little guy Rocky, and coming up on 6 months. He's doing wonderfully. Thank you in this community for everybody that's followed our journey and watched our story develop. If you want a picture, shoot me a text message, and I'll be happy to share a couple of thousand of them of him. I just recorded a session that is going live any day now for Skip on the intersection of competitive intelligence and essentially supporting different business functional groups inside of an enterprise. And if Cam's on the line, I know he's looked at it and maybe found a few nuggets of value in there. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, even though I haven't heard the final cut. The premise is this: if in difficult times, we can all band together as human beings. And, those that know me well probably know that I'm all parts, humanistic in my approach. And, I do try to practice a lot of empathy for other people. But, I also have an intense competitive spirit. So at the end of that webinar that I just recorded, there's a picture of Kobe Bryant. And of course, we all know we lost Kobe late January, January 26th, or give or take. And what I talk about in that webinar is being able to kind of turn on your empathy and your humanistic side of your approach to life. And then being able to, when necessary, set that aside and move into a mode, we're all competitive intelligence professionals, right? Or some variation of it. Move into a mode like Kobe did, where he set that family guy, girl dad, sort of mentality aside, and he got into this mindset where he became the Black Mamba. And, I think that people, if they do it right, they can play both sides of that effectively. I'm still practicing that approach, and I don't always get it right, by the way. And I think that that's pretty clear. Ask my 13-year-old how often I get it wrong, and you'd have a whole dissertation about that. But the point is, being able to kind of, I think in some ways it could be valuable to take on a little bit of an alter ego. When you're thinking about the role that you have for your business and your enterprise with the job you've been hired to perform, and then the a little bit more empathy, teachability, other things that might be required both in that role, but also, at home, whether you're a spouse or a parent or just a dear friend of somebody. That's the message I wanted to share today. And, I don't know that necessarily gets into the VUCA world or pandemic changes. I will say that I am actually quite excited. I just registered for a local COVID-19 antibody test, and I take that thing on Monday. I had something, most of my team had something coming out of a 25th anniversary Aurora offsite that we did late January. That was very unusual in its format, high fevers, respiratory issues, et cetera. And there's a part of me that hopes that I test positive for that antibody, of course, for a lot of reasons. But I'm more so just trying to feed my insatiable curiosity about the whole thing. Anyway, Cynthia, I hope that helped, and happy to take any questions in the chat thread.
Yeah, I think it's terrific, that there is a human element, because I think it's important for us to just be in touch with that, right? The empathy and the humility, because I think what that allows us is the importance of perspective in intelligence. If we get myopic, we get into a whole host of troubles, right? As analysts and as decision makers. And so I think what you're saying is, is really fundamental, to that aspect as well. And we often forget that because we focus on the tools and the techniques, right? The technology, various sources and methods. And this goes back to what Mark was saying as well, that, we are not cogs, right? We're not, just components, to the greater part. We're whole beings, and so is the system. And so for us to understand, for example, what's happening on a macro environmental level, in terms of human behavior, in terms of policy making and so forth, we need to be able to use empathy and get into different types of mindsets and so forth, to be able to understand what is at the end of this, to be able to derive conclusions that are sounder than it would be otherwise. So yes, what you say I think is completely relevant. And so with this, let's see if Ellen, are you back with us on audio?
Let's see. Can you hear me better?
No, it's still tinny. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll move on, but maybe you can dial in by phone, and we'll patch you in that way. You can stay on video, but just change your audio. And then at this point, I'm going to move over to Alysee. So Alysee, would you like to weigh in on your experience?
Oh, you're jumping through the list. I was last, so I thought I could sit back and do the typical, but everybody already gave a good answer, so darn it. So my perspective, I guess, on CI, I'm not an oldie folk person. haven't been in the fellows very long. I like to think I'm somewhat youthful, so I will not disclose how long I've been in CI. But the thing that I think it hasn't been addressed yet that is important is the ability to accommodate business need. And what I mean by that is not every company wants a strategically minded person to run their CI function. I've been saying this for years, is that the tactical CI person is just as important, if not more important at this point. With what we're living with right now and how companies are struggling, that tactical CI person is going to navigate these really treacherous waters for companies to help them stay afloat while the world is kind of becoming chaotic around them, where customers are not buying product at the same time or services at the same rate as they used to. And I always say that if you can't get your current sales teams and marketing teams in line with a solid tactical competitive strategy, it doesn't matter what your strategic strategy is, because your company may not exist in 3 to 5 years to see that strategy through. So I just want to give a massive call out to those on the phone that are doing the grunt work of helping sales enablement, helping the marketing teams properly position their teams. That's a huge effort that I think oftentimes does not get appreciated like it should. So just know there are folks in the fellows that absolutely appreciate what you do.
Thank you. That's terrific. And so as we move along here, let's see, I'm just trying to get Ellen. Are you on phone yet? You're not. Okay. So let's go to August as we continue to skip ahead. August.
But so many others have had great comments already. So I would like to synthesize a couple of things, actually, because people have shared some great comments, and I'll start with synthesizing what Alysee was just sharing. Absolutely, the tactical competitive intelligence and support, the role of sales support and bringing competitive insights and macro insights into marketing and other functions is really very critical. And I remember early on in my Skip membership, there were a couple of articles that seemed to indicate kind of like, well, if you're not talking to the CEO on a daily basis, you're nothing and you're useless in competitive intelligence. And they, some of those authors, some pretty prominent people, I'm not going to call people out by name unless you get a couple drinks in me, hit that hammer really, really hard. And I had just come through the telecommunications industry in the early 2000s went through effectively a depression that really makes even some of the most dramatic economic impacts of our current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic actually look kind of mild by comparison. And I don't say that to understate the severity of what anybody's experiencing right now, but I was in an industry in the early 2000s where we went from here's your blank check for $3 million for this consultant or this analyst. It doesn't really matter what they're doing. And, in the space of a month, we went from, hey, would you mind bringing your own staples from home because we can't afford staples anymore. And so lived through a series of just drastic cut to the bone layoffs because we were doing really great sales support. And we were one of the few support functions that was still allowing sales to win business. And and then joining Skip and finding out, well, you're not talking to the CEO, so you're nothing, you're useless. It's just like, well, that is not my experience one bit. So I said I was going to synthesize, and then I just, turned into, rah, rah, rah for the great points that Alysee just made. But I do want to go and pivot actually back to some of the comments that Mark made. And that Derek supported as well. I absolutely agree in that very humanist, very empathetic approach, and I believe in the value. And I think this is one of the things that gets into, where are we going to, what are we going to begin to see, is a very different conception of what it means to be competitive. Picking up on some of those themes, I've been thinking a lot and talking a lot with some of my fellows about things like non-zero sum competition. The idea that the basis of competition is being the best version of you or your organization that you can possibly be, as opposed to necessarily beating your competition in some zero-sum game. I mean, I like to compete as much as the next guy, but thinking about competition in terms of having somebody who's a competitor who's smart and good at what they do and delivers value for the customers, and is somebody who's pushing me to do all of those things for myself better. That's how I start to think about and conceive of competition, and what is changing for us. And then, we could write a whole dissertation about what it means in terms of the technological tools to do our jobs, with a lot of the trends that are playing out and are accelerating in our current pandemic situation. But I think I've gone on long enough. I'm happy to carry on in the chat. Cynthia, I'll hand it back to you so that you can take us to our next panelist.
Sounds good. I think we have Ellen on the phone now. So is that you, Ellen?
That's me.
We are getting an echo, so I think there's something going on your end, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Yeah, I muted myself.
Okay.
I know what I need to do.
Okay.
Let me leave the meeting and I'll come right back.
All right. See you later. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, it's Zoom and COVID times. So with this, we also have Martha Matteo, a fellow, a long-serving fellow who was in the life sciences. And so, Martha, would you be able to share your thoughts?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Very well.
Well, hello, everybody. I've been out of the official who gets who industry game for some time. I retired in 06 and retired from Skip in 08, I guess. But I've had some interesting experiences since then, which I could try to be brief and share. First, the comment was made that what about data about the future from Mark Chussil, which was a good comment, but I would remind people that Richard Clavens tried to get to that question by his way of looking at grants of the NIH that were not funded as a possible window into the future. I don't know if this is familiar to people. What Richard was doing was originally was using citations on papers and who's citing who to basically map where the science is going. And now, but that was all, anything that was published was at least 18 months out of date. So instead, in addition, he went to the NIH, National Institute of Health, to look at grants, permission to look at grants that were not funded because people didn't think they were going anyplace. And very often those are the ones that wind up as predictors of the future. So keep in touch with Richard Clavens if you're in the pharma industry or others. He may have something to tell you. I switched gears from pharma and consulting with a consulting company in about 2009, and I'm not the one to get a questionnaire about IT. But what I think is worth sharing from my experience, and probably still relevant, is how first of all, my perspective was totally internal. I only consulted for my own company. So I knew the people, and I got their comments at who's going with who and what's happening at conferences and so on. So I would go up to the international head of medicine and say to him, for example, what are your assumptions about the competition? Oh, no, first, what is your goal for next year? And the answer was, oh, I want to in-license 3 new products, early products. Fine. What are your assumptions about the competition? And so that would be, they do a certain amount of monitoring and say, well, my job is to test those assumptions and come back to you, and you'll be the first to know. In other words, I'm not the idea killer here. I am here to help you take a better look at what you're doing. And then the final thing was to tell, this is a specific example. I just came from a meeting where the head of the board, chairman of the board, said that we're not going to put a price on our early pipeline because it's too early, you really don't know. And that made sense, except that he now has to decide, as from his own mouth, that what he's going to pay for 3 early drugs next year. I said, how are you going to decide how much to pay if you're not going to look at your own products and give some estimates? Oh, was kind of the comment. So by asking people, what are your assumptions? What are your goals? What is your job for next year or 2 years or 10 years? What are your assumptions about those? My job is to test them, and you'll be the first to know, so I'm not challenging you in a public way. That worked a number of times in a good way. Another quirky thing that I can share as an example about who's going with who and knowing what's going on in your own company. I was with a German company, and there were the finals on the big decisions were made in Germany, but we had a candidate for in-licensing in the field that the US was familiar with. And there were a number of reasons why the R&D people who'd been queried said no. And one of them was, put in a nice way, the guy's a crook. Second, company X has just killed 4 molecules that look almost exactly the same to the one that you're proposing. And there was a third, which was, if we take this on, we'll kill 2 or 3 other things internal that are considered very important. So fine, that's what went back to the team, and it was rejected by our group. But there was one person in the company who wasn't eager to see the US group succeed. So what the head of R&D came running, and he said, in 2 hours, there will be a meeting in Germany where this guy is the only technical person, and then there are 7 other people in the business who will make decisions. I said, do these people, do the other 7 consider themselves fit, however you would interpret that, to make a decision? He said, no, they'll go with the lead guy. I said, well, why don't we make you a fax, half a page with the 3 facts that I just mentioned, with pictures of the molecules so that they can see that they look the same and the consequences, and non-suable comments about the guy's ethics, and send it off. We'll just see what happens. 2 hours later, 3 hours later, he came back and he said, it worked. They killed it, 7-1. So this is taking the temperature of your company, but from different angles, or your client, from different angles, to see where the important decisions are and how they're seen across the board. So if I can have a few more minutes, I just want to say what I'm doing now.
Well, and actually, Martha, if we can just do a quick time check. So we have a couple of folks who've yet to come. So yes, if you could just
okay.
Briefly, summarize.
Well,
thank you.
What I've been doing for the past 8 years is something called Science Olympiad, which is a middle school and high school program for students in our district, national, who choose from among 23 challenges across all areas of STEM and decide that that's what they want to learn about and that's what they want to compete in. And there are 3 big competitions at which they will check themselves. Now, I went in this because the school district needed it, needed the exposure in STEM. Secondly, the kids wanted more STEM, so this got up and running. We prepared a lot of supporting material. The organization gave a lot of supporting material, but then how do you run it? And our original goals were, we help your child learn to learn what they want to. So to explore, if it's astronomy they like, get to know the NASA site, for example, these kinds of things. Don't be afraid of learning. And so the first year they went and I said, you're not going to come back with any medals. This is to learn, come on back. So they did 13 out of 23 challenges and came back with a first, a second, 2/3, and a fourth. The next year I said, how many kids want to go to state? Every arm shot up. So much for learning to learn. We want to win. So then for the next period of time, it was a question of getting the kids and the families familiar, and the coaches, because we began to recruit coaches in the community who were expert in STEM or just loved a particular issue, to work with the students. Each student pair with coaches was a little different because of the chemistries involved, but it was understood that the student was the one who was learning the goals and setting the goals. And if they met their goals, it was successful. So this is a little different than the normal competitive assessment, but I realized the other day as I'm sitting down that this is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and thank you for the community service, because I think that's a wonderful way, I think, to continue to give back, once we retire, and to be able to link what we do to the next generation. And I really appreciate that, and you're sharing this with us, Martha. And now we've got, I think we've got Ellen on the line now. And so how is your phone line working, Ellen?
Let's see, is it working?
Still tinny, but maybe if you can get closer.
Well, I'm about as close as I can get to my phone line.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
thinking I'm just not on for today.
Well, that's good.
All righty, and we'll see if maybe Michael Neugarten, you just joined us here, so maybe we'll just give you some time to queue up, and we'll move on to Suki Fuller.
Not really. No, not really. There's a lot of comments that have been made. It kind of sucks being this late. I should have gone first.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I'm bringing up the rear. So yeah.
But there are a number of points that I probably am more inclined to agree with. Like Mark, I'm somewhat of a heretic, and so I would say, looking at what my preferred job title is, so analytical storyteller. And I put those two words together because based on the theory and practical application of the training from Mercyhurst, I did get the analytical skills really squared away. But then you have the storyteller part, and that's the part of going out and having right out the gate on my internship, and then on my first actual position, I got to work with Jan Herring, who is the Grand Poobah. So right out the bat, I got to work with somebody who has done the very thing that a lot of people in CI have struggled with initially, and that is the human part. It is the actual primary part, going to conferences, having to speak to sources, develop sources, and do that information gathering. So I got that training from Jan while I was on my internship, and it mixed very well with my personality, because while I am very much an analyst, I do very much like people. So it mirrors, and I think when you're looking at people within the CI field, we have a lot of us that are very much like this. We sway one way or the other, but we all are very much like this. But I think that in the past few years that I've been in the field, that been in the sector, the career, whatever you want to call it, I've seen too many people lose that human element, and they've become very much desk in the way that they function, because society has valued intelligence as being something of data. And so we're losing that part, that ability to be able to tell the story of that data. And I think that's probably the one area that I'm really worried about, because I think that's the demise of the CI profession. And because anybody coming in now can analyze data, you don't even need to actually be able to analyze data. You can just feed it into some machine and it does it for you. But it is the interpretation. And that's the part that I think I worry about. But at the same time, there are these younger generation coming up, and they are more humanistic in the way that they do approach problem solving. They are looking at it more empathetically, because they're living in a time that has been constantly evolving. There hasn't been any static, I mean, there never is really any static time, but it's more noticeable for them that things are constantly changing, and the world has become more complex, a lot faster, a lot more in depth for them their whole entire life, whereas some of us, it's been there, but not so in our face. And so I worry, but at the same time, you know, I'm a little pragmatist. I'm struggling. There are days when I'm just like, I think this is going to go to hell. And then there are days where I'm really, really optimistic that it's not going to be that way. So I don't know. There's just that whole thing. I don't know. Too many comments that have been made that mirror what I was going to say. So, meh.
That's all right. You built upon it nicely.
Just give you that part. But oh, by the way, as for Martha and the whole pharma thing, I could just say that some of the stuff that I saw back in pharma that people said was not going to work. It's amazing how they crushed it at the FDA, the, you know, adverse events of people working with cannabis, and now look where it is. So what can I say? Let's look at what was being developed 20 years ago. It's probably going to be the cure for something now.
Right. That's terrific. I really appreciate this. And actually, we're gonna give Ellen one last shot to see if we can get her phone to work. So Ellen, let's see where you are right now. Is it working?
Well, I think my phone's working.
Yes, here we are. All right, you're on.
Congratulations, Ellen.
I don't know what happened, but
well, it's all yours now. Yeah, you've got a couple of minutes.
All right, I'll just take a couple. What I really see changing, oh gosh. Why does this happen?
There we go.
All right.
Humor here. Communication seems to be the thing that's really changed over time. Am I echoing again?
You are echoing
yes.
again, I'm afraid. This is yeah, you've got a ghost in the machine here. It's not a good
Can I just pipe in for Ellen and just say Ellen is the queen of collaboration in intelligence.
That's right. And also I have
what I'll do? I'll just write out a few comments and you all can carry on. How's that?
Sounds good. And thanks for trying. Yeah, I appreciate it. And you know, and Ellen too, you know, for those of you who know her work, you know, we've talked about empathy, we've talked about human storytelling. You know, Ellen is one of the masters of this as well. So I look to her, you know, when we're looking at these types of intelligence activities and functions. So and I echo what Suki said. So I think I'm bringing up the rear here, and I'll just be very brief, because we have some really exciting announcements to share with our community practitioners here.
If I may interrupt, Cynthia, what about Brad?
Oh yes, so Brad. Well, Brad will weigh in, but we're still going through the rounds. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I have talking notes from people that I'm like, from.
No one's getting away.
People have sent me notes about their participation. So actually, before I get to that though, I do want to mention that Kalb wasn't able to join us, but he did us a real solid. You know, he put together an extensive list of bullet items about what he's seeing, different trends that we should be focusing on as a way of moving forward. And so I have it in email form, but what I will do is I'm going to compile this and I'm going to share it, in a medium that I'll be announcing soon, and that will serve as the basis of continuing this conversation that we have. But some of the things that that Cliff is focusing on is, things like capitalism being questioned, right, as an economic system, and business transportation and industries involved, and what the impact of that will be, and just using all of our various skills and the various insights that we've been talking about today, to help us understand what is to come, because there are more unknowns, I think, for us, than ever before. And so it really is, in most organizations, and I think most of us are feeling it, it's all hands on deck, right, to try, to develop a situational analysis. And then for, some organizations, we're also trying to really, get into foresight to stay ahead of these developments. But he's talking about things like, cash as a medium, and also, consumers accelerating the shifts from bricks and mortar, and even, things about where, the United Nations and other organizations stand in terms of policies and so forth, and scientific innovation. So I will post this. And so to say that Cliff is here in spirit with us, as much as he can't be here today due to a conflict. And so I'll just bring up the rear before we go into some of the exciting initiatives that I'm really eager to share, by saying that as we look at where we've been and the lessons learned, I know for me, one of the things that I think is tremendously important is alignment. And by saying that, and there's a whole lot, as we can say about this and everything that people have already raised. So we're just scratching the surface here. But we've already talked about alignment with our users' goals and objectives, also organizations. But we also, very importantly, we need to align our efforts too with what is happening externally, and so that we can bring those insights in and help adjust those goals and objectives, because blind spots will get you. And for those of you who've been following blind spots all the way back to Ben Galad's book and even beyond, we understand that that biases will get us. And in my work, one of the key lessons I've learned over time, and I didn't get this actually at the beginning of my career, a couple of decades ago plus, is that most Intel failures have biases associated with them. And so by definition, it's really hard to get ahead of biases, but there are things that we can do, to mitigate their effects. And so it's really important that we expand our perspectives by doing so, and by being keenly aware of what our biases are, also our users' biases. What's impeding them from seeing what it is that you want to communicate? What is impeding them from seeing what's out there that they need to be bringing internally? And what's impeding them from seeing what may come? And so here we are, squarely in the middle of this pandemic crisis. We've all heard about, a lot of warnings and so forth, that's occurred, over the decade plus about this. And the key here is that there's more to come. There will be more surprises, more of the unforeseen. And so how can we try to see as much of that as possible? And so if we focus ourselves on not just aligning internally, but also aligning with what is happening externally, so we can bring that in to the internal and be the leaders and advisors that our users need us to be, whether or not they realize it. That's important. So how can we prepare for this? Well, many of us are not in a position of advisors, at least in terms of foresights and forecasting. And one of the things I want to mention is that Victoria Richards mentioned in our last webinar in March, that, what do you do in a situation where you have users that are really focusing on what is ahead of them, immediately ahead of them, and what is the now, as opposed to what is further down, along the cone of uncertainty. And the important thing here is that, we need to try to take more of our, make more of an effort, to help them understand the importance of getting ahead of the issues instead of being reactive. And so, as we do so, we're living this right now. We're living the effects of it. So we can point to this and think about how much we could have ameliorated, what we could have avoided, how well could we have prepared for this if we had seen it coming, if we had heeded some of the warnings that were in place. So anyway, There's a whole lot I can say about this and about biases and so forth, but I do want to touch on this as we think about how we can prepare. And I'd like to take this, into different media that that we'll be sharing with you in the coming months. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about to share is that we'll be launching in May the CI Community of Practice on Slack. And so for those of you who are not on Slack, it is a collaboration, a team building tool that exists. And the CI fellows are already on it for our own purposes internally, but we also want to create a community of folks like you who will join us in discussions like this, because what we've come to discover over the course of the past couple of webinars is that the webinars in and of themselves do not answer the questions in a timely way. Once a month doesn't cut it, and we tend to run out of time. So by creating this community of practice, we can provide ongoing practice support. We can build on discussions that we might have initiated here and on the chats that we oftentimes don't have a chance to get to. And also, because we can segment this, according to different channels, we can create different types of collaboration opportunities for folks who are out here as well. And we can provide you resources too. And I do want to mention that if somebody could mute yourself here. I'm hearing somebody seems to be on the phone and okay, excuse me. I'm just gonna, okay, I'm taking over here. All right, so excuse me, sorry about that. And so, so what we want to do is we want to bring this to the community so that this is an ongoing discussion. So stay tuned for the launch of that. We'll be announcing this via our newsletter. So sign on for that, instructions to come at the end of this if you're not already signed on to our newsletter. And it will also be announced on our website as well as our social media group, Twitter and LinkedIn. And then we're also launching our CI Fellows Mentorship Program. So I'll be turning this over to Alysee Nockels in another 30 seconds or so. And I also want to mention that in celebration of the 30th year of our initial inductees, we'll be conducting an interview series of a number of fellows who have contributed to building this practice over the years and gaining their insights. And so we'll be conducting these interviews and offering them via video, podcasts, and also in writing, and we'll be doing this on a rolling basis throughout 2020. So again, keep a lookout for these announcements. And then in September, we'll have the virtual summit series. And so this is meant to complement the different conferences that are out there that are already in the CI space. And with the virtual summit series, we want to take what's hot, what people really care about, different topics that people want to dive into. And we're doing deep dives into narrow topics. And so we'll have a series of these throughout the year, and we'll start with the one in September. So again, keep a lookout for the dates. But this is what we have in store for you for 2020. There will be more to come, but this is what we're ready to share right now. So without further ado, I do want to turn this over to the CI. The mentorship program committee led by Alysee Nockels, and it's Suki Fuller and Naylor are also a part of this. And so it's all yours, Alysee.
Thanks, Cynthia. I'm going to run through this really quick, but huge kudos to Suki and Ellen for being they did all this work. I just get to talk because I pulled the short straw. So that's the only reason why I'm on the phone. And Ellen can't seem to get her phone to work for whatever reason. I hope you do figure that out at some point. All right, can you move to the next slide? I really want to quickly talk about what we're planning to do with this mentorship program, because it's not what you may have seen from other programs, other institutions, other organizations you're part of. We really want to create a program that is customized around the mentee, the person that is asking for the career advice, the guidance, and so forth. And we're doing it in two different ways. We're customizing the type of program for each individual user, as well as personalizing it for your needs. So very quickly, moving to the next slide, what I mean by customized is we have 4 different levels of mentorship that we think will be useful for the CI community. And these range from anywhere from a Kickstarter conversation, meaning a very introduction, very simple email conversation or a couple phone conversations, to talk about a particular topic of interest. That's a very low, entry level into our mentorship program. Then there's the 3 and 6 month options, and these are really centered around a particular business objective. So let's say your boss just said, hey, you're a CI person, go do win-loss. And you're like, I don't know what win-loss is. This would be a great opportunity to do a 3-month mentoring with someone on the fellows who is a win-loss expert. And by the way, we have quite some very good expertise in win-loss. That's just one example. It could be you have to do a battle card, or it could be a strategic presentation. Whatever that is, that particular topic, a 3-month mentoring is an amazing, great way to get that insight from someone on the fellows. The 6-month mentoring is really around more of like a couple different topics. You've got a meatier subject that you want to tackle, or multiple initiatives you need help in your career. That would be where more like a 6-month engagement would make the most sense. And then lastly is the 1-year mentoring, and this is probably more closer to what you've seen from other organizations, more of a traditional mentoring approach, more about long-term career guidance, those kinds of things within the CI community. So that's how we're customizing it. Now, the next slides talk about personalization, and this is where I think we're doing a little bit different than everybody else. So instead of just saying, you're a mentee, pair you with a mentor, boom, done, we're going to take a bit more of a hands-on approach, meaning we want to know more about you, what you want, where your industry is, where your career is going, and where your areas or functional responsibilities are today. Knowing that, then we can match you with someone in our mentor pool that shares the same common industry, same objectives, has the right experience, those things that you need. So it's not just a randomized, okay, you're available match. It's trying to put a little bit more thought up front to make sure the mentor and mentee pairings make sense. So lots to talk about. We only have 2 minutes. We're launching this in May. So moving to the next slide, just telling you like what we need you to do. So your call to action right now is, if you're interested, sign up. And signing up is super simple. You send an email to cimentoring@cifellows.com. Tell us the type of mentorship you want, type of mentor you want. You want, like, do you want someone with like a lot of experience in strategy or in tactical, or what do you need? And then we can start building up that pool of interested mentees. But if we move on to the next slide, I know I'm breezing through this really quick. We are also looking for mentors as well. So this is not just a CI Fellows thing. We are just initiating the program. We are looking for people in the community as well who want to be mentors. So if you have an interest in being a mentor, send us the same email address. Tell us, more about yourself, what your industry experience is, where you want to help out, and join our mentor program. So all of this is being launched in May. We'll have more details on our website. We're going to have short bios of each of the mentors available, so that if you're kind of like, I don't really know what I'm getting into, you can pre-read some of the mentors that are available and actually pre-select someone if they meet what you need. So I did that super fast, but we are right at the top of the hour.
Thank you. Perfect, Alysee. Thank you so much. And thanks for the efforts of this team to bring this together. And we're really excited for this to launch in May. So as Alysee said, please stay tuned to our website. Also, in the meantime, if you want to get started, just email the email you see there, cimentoring@cifellows.com. If you want to learn more about the various initiatives that we have in store and as they roll out, please email acme@cifellows.com to get on the mailing list. And if you want to listen to recordings of our webinars, you can find it in the path that you see there at www.cifellows.com. But stay tuned to join us on Twitter, as well as our LinkedIn community group. And those are the different ways that you can stay on top of things. But we're really excited about the mentorship program, and also to complement that, the community of practice, because some folks don't want the one-to-one, but you have some quick hits, and you still need some advice and guidance. And so we want to create this community so that we can be supportive. And the beauty of the community of practice too is that it is not wide open. And so we'll share more details about that. But it is a closed community, so you'll need to be invited into it. But you can ask to be invited. So with all of that, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay tuned too. Our next webinar is May 27th. So if those of you who are just tuned into our calendar, you'll notice that our webinars are the last Wednesdays of every month. So that's typically when it is. So you can make this appointment viewing and just put this in your calendar for every month. And so our next one will be May 27th, and we'll explore things like sources and methods, how we are adopting and adapting some new sources and methods for our intelligence practices, and also in light of this pandemic crisis. So we'll continue with this thread, with what we're learning through the pandemic crisis. But we're going to look at some sources and methods. It's been some time since we've done that, and a number of the fellows, have been developing some pretty cool tools, pretty cool techniques, and adapting them as well, adapting some existing ones. So join us for that conversation. So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our LinkedIn group and in that community of practice that we'll be launching very soon. So take care and stay well, everybody.